Cool. So today we're going to talk about how hard it is to get a job in tech.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to talk about. The market does feel like it's picking up a bit. There's been a lot of change recently, but I think it is possible for junior devs to get roles, but a lot harder than it was when we got into tech. Yeah, I think even seniors are finding the struggle as well. And I think there's a growing sense from the people that I follow on LinkedIn around ageism in tech hurting the other side as well. So as you get a little bit older and there's a round of adjustment redundancies, that kind of thing, it can be quite tricky for those people to get roles again. So yeah, I think it's difficult from both sides, really, isn't it?
Yeah, the ageism sort of aspect is an interesting one because in the last episode when we were talking about AI, we were talking about how learning and evolving tool chain is really important. Like learning, the latest and greatest industry is helpful for you in your career, and it's known that it becomes a lot harder to learn as you sort of get older and sort of establish new techniques. And in general, it's just a lot to keep up with as you mature in life. So I wonder if that's a real challenge, actually, keeping up with all the latest and greatest tech.
Yeah, I think it is. I think a lot of skills are like timeless. There's system thinking stuff. Yeah, obviously loads of great books around good software engineering practice that stand the test of time. There is that we've got to be doing the latest and greatest thing sort of feel at the moment. Like we touched on the last episode around people feeling left out because of AI. And that's putting a real focus on Python and TypeScript stacks and whole ecosystems around that. Whereas there's obviously a lot of Java developers and .NET developers try to play in those spaces as well. But the tooling is just behind a little bit for those ecosystems. So it does change the tech that gets mentioned on these job posts that I'm seeing. You're now expected to know TypeScript and Python and Java and God knows what else. Like just a big old list now. Whereas before it might have been a bit more like we're looking for Ruby on Rails devs, and that you would only have to be good at that, and that's fine. And now
Yeah.
you be able to spin up your own infrastructure and know Terraform and do a UI mockup, and it's like, yeah, I can see why it's really terrifying for people to look at the tech job market and get a foot in there because it is just the expectation's so broad, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few things contributing to that too, right? So I remember, back in 2005, I saw a job spec that was like, we're looking for a Rails engineer, like you mentioned. I looked at the spec and I was like, that is me. I can absolutely do that. I have a specific set of skills that can do that. And I think, I don't know if it's just because the stacks have got more complicated, or because the recruiters, the people in the middle, are less informed of those changes in the stacks, or a lot of the stuff, as you said, it's like we expect you to be able to run a production cluster of machines that can scale to 1 billion users and build the thing and code the perfect accessible front end. And maybe it's just the ecosystems become more complicated, or requirements have changed, but it seems a lot more complicated, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think there is a lot more expected on each person, it feels like. As team shapes get smaller for product development, you're expected to wear more hats. And we're already seeing it a little bit with delivery leaning kind of roles where you're like, I'm a scrum master, which would be, you'd hear that every day, all the time years ago. And now it's like, actually, we're just going to fold that into the UX role, or we're going to fold it into an engineering role, or whatever it is. You then have to then become that sort of T-shaped consultant, don't you? To pull off a product. But it on the flip side, you are seeing like these solo entrepreneurs doing that, aren't you? Like wearing all the hats can work sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's probably incredibly liberating, right? Like, the fact that you can take something from an idea to a production ready thing is hugely liberating and exciting. In like the modern tech that supports that these days is exciting. But I was having a chat with Remy Sharp, actually, and he was relatively sweary about the fact that he really dislikes the term full stack engineer. And I do actually have to, having used the same label for myself in the past, I have to agree with him. Like, I think full stack it was a promise that was never really kept. I think the fact that you were getting someone that could do it all at the same level of quality, the same level of expertise. I know that you do have really talented people out there that are very good at all these different aspects, but I think it probably missold a lot of things to the people who thought they were getting a well-rounded individual that could do everything.
Yeah, I mean, I still think of certain people as back end or front end leaning, even if they are full stack, and everyone's got a leaning. And yeah, you're going to have blind spots. You're seeing a lot of these new AI developed platforms where they've grabbed Superbase and they've vibe coded it, and they know a bit of front end, but they don't know any back end stuff. And it's like they're getting hacked straight away because they don't know anything about like role level permissions or like good API design or security or anything. So it's that balance, isn't it? You want to empower people to get in and do stuff, but then they need to know where the dangers are. Where I think we've talked about Rails quite a lot, don't we? But it was just a good, safe thing to just pick up and like use it as the documentation says and not get badly hurt because it's got all the bits that you need in it. It's got batteries included, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting point around because the sort of ability to build something with so little friction these days does provide a level of self-confidence that it takes a lot of skill and effort and energy to get to that level of expertise. And I think the feeling that you can shortcut that and be as good as that is damaging to the industry. And I think that is something that we're seeing show up in job interviews, in the way that we put job ads out, the expectations, a junior role for expecting 20 years worth of expertise in all these different amazing technologies. It's really inflating that ask on people. And, you could argue this has been a problem ever since, COVID and the pandemic in general, just like what that did to the job market, what that did for people's ability to learn new things and jump into those next bigger roles. Interesting.
It is, yeah. And it, from an employer's end, like how do you actually figure out if people can actually do the job? It's really tricky. I mean, see, our friend Barnaby got a job at Meta and he did a load of leak code research because you've got to do, when you get interviewed at Meta, it's the very sort of difficult tech tests or very sort of abstract problems that you need to solve, along with all the other areas like the human impact, the human side of it. And like, there's just so many areas that they're looking for. Whereas I feel like in the wider job market at the moment, that leak code style test is almost become obsolete for the same reasons that homework has in schools, right? It's like, because if they're doing it online, there's a good chance they might be using AI to help them write the solution, right? It's like, how do you prevent against that? I mean, we were talking with James from work, weren't we, around like, people definitely are using AI in job interviews more and more. And does that change the way that you need to talk to people? Do you need to see people face to face more? Do you need to get people in and pairing on a problem so you see how their brain works a bit? Like, it's really tricky, isn't it? And that hasn't on the candidates themselves about what they need to swat up on, I guess, before their interview.
Yeah, it's a really interesting out because when you get a candidate that's really good, you're like, are they really good, or are they just really good at pretending they're really good? And that's a really damaging thing for the interview process, because someone might be absolutely amazing and trying their heart out to like really impress and show their skills and the breadth and depth of knowledge. I can't remember what the tool was called, but someone got really got a lot of virality with what was it, AC coding interview, and it was like an AI agent that basically did it for them while they were doing an interview. I can't remember what it was called. Do you remember?
I can't remember, but I do remember seeing it. And I guess the tells with it are that people pause and then it looks like they're reading from something, and then you're like, oh, it's a bit weird.
Yeah, and that's only one aspect of how like this sort of fake it till you make it approach to interviews might be really damaging. Well, it is 100% damaging to the industry, and if anything, it just puts a more rigorous test on other parts of your internal processes, like how many stages of interviews that you put them through, what your screening process looks like, even down to what your probation period looks like, and is it flexible enough to allow you to act quickly if you realise that the person who you interviewed wasn't the same person that showed up on the first day.
Yeah, well, we've all heard horror stories around that where you have a candidate that interviews really well, the test goes well, scores highly, and then you realise they can't actually do the job that they need to do. And I guess a lot of recruitment people have the protections in place for that now, but they
Mm,
must see that being invoked a lot more, and it's unhelpful not just for the employer but for the candidate to allow that happen to the candidate. That's quite uh, it's unfair for everyone, isn't it, really? It's not a nice no one wants that to happen, so
yeah. I mean, I think these are problems that have existed like way before the pandemic, though. I think they're just exacerbated by like the influx and scale of what we're seeing. I remember, a while ago, before the pandemic, we had an issue with someone that wasn't turning up, and it turns out they had two jobs and they were running a car salesman thing on the side, yeah, I just remember thinking that's an incredible move, an incredibly confident move to be able to do two jobs at once. But these problems have existed long before. Yeah, it's just like I was amazed, but also new tech exacerbates the ability to do that sort of stuff, and it spooks people and it makes people question like what roles they had at what pace to the teams. Yeah, it's especially when things are a bit challenging, with like resourcing. Right, what's the next really valuable role we're going to add to the team? It makes you ask all those questions, right?
yeah, definitely. Because the reason you need the role you're filling is to, yeah, accelerate the team. It takes a weight off people that are maybe a bit under pressure. The reason you start hiring process is to sort of balance it all out, and it's unfair on those people when it's not working out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really important to get right. But yeah, I guess on the flip side, I guess to for candidates to sort of avoid that is to sort of be honest and say, if you don't know something, just say that you don't know, because it might be that they do have another role for you or they would make decisions based on what you said that would better suit you in the long term. So
Mm,
if you're like, I've got no interest, or I just don't understand infrastructure as code,
mm,
then they're not going to put you directly onto an infrastructure as code project. They wouldn't
yeah.
do that. And that's actually going to be good for your career, right? Because you could sort of dabble on it. Maybe you get slowly introduced to it and you can play around, and then
Mm,
you did find yourself enjoying it, you could fold it into your career. But if they think you can do it and they stick you on a gig and you can't do it, they're going to have to do a rescue mission on it. They're going to pull someone else in. And let's say it did all kind of work out in the end and you chat GPT'd your way through it. It's going to be a bit by the skin of your teeth. And yeah, it's
mm.
not necessarily going to work out. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think there's something in there around like creating a really positive environment for the interview to be successful. So how you create that psychological safety and that sort of at ease moment where people can really just talk openly about, yeah, I know this, I really don't know that, and like actually, these are my strengths and weaknesses. Now, obviously, there are situations where this won't work as well for you. Like I imagine, through the interview process at Meta, like you mentioned, there is definitely a really high expectation that you should know everything around the specialism that you're applying for, especially when you're looking at the sort of staff principal engineer level. But I do think that sort of that ability to have a really open conversation, because I also think it's really important for interviewees to remember that you're looking at the company just as much as they're looking at you. You're trying to figure out whether it's what you want to do and you want to spend your time there. So there's still a degree of power in your hands around like, is this right for me?
Yeah. And you just need to show up as the best version of yourself. And I guess my advice is probably slightly different for um, men and women, strangely, because often men will massively exaggerate their skill and women will downplay. So, yeah, it's probably quite different advice for different kinds of personality types as well as gender. But if you're quite introverted, it might be that you need to dial it up a bit and back yourself. You know you're good at that thing, tell them.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, if you find yourself quite extroverted, dial it down a bit on the bits you don't know. So you just gotta, yeah, you gotta hone it in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely a really big, like a big part of the sort of empathetic side of the interview where you're trying to really understand what that person is trying to say, and it's not always what comes out of their mouth. And as you said, there's definitely the gender split where the behaviors are different, and the starting point for some of these, some of these things is different, where the confidence maybe higher in men in some of these areas. And I think it's good as an interviewer to sort of probe that a little bit and say, actually, I think you actually are talking about something that is, quite an advanced topic, and you're downplaying that. So can we dig into that a bit more? Can you tell me more about your experience there? And
Yeah.
that's your job as an interviewer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll pick up on that and they should ask follow-up questions for sure.
yeah. Oh, go on, sorry.
I was just gonna ask, like, what would you recommend for sort of people trying to get into coding, into tech, like, as a first job?
Um, what I recommend is the actual job itself, or how would you go about it, or
How they go about it? Yeah, what do they need to learn? What should they focus on?
I think the point you made around there's some skills that are timeless, and there's some skills that are really valuable to you, like regardless of the specialism, I guess. And it depends on the role, whether you're going for a product management role, from an engineering role, from a tester role, but I think there's some really fundamental things that you need to understand around, like how systems are designed, how good teams operate. I always look to like more cultural aspects as well, like Radical Candor. I don't know if you've read Radical Candor,
Yeah, great
but
book,
like
yeah.
really good book on just how to optimize and get the most out of a team, but also how to communicate really clearly around communicate really passionately and emotionally aware around something and directly, so people really know what you mean. And I think good communication is always like a skill that you will never perfect, but you can always work on, and obviously will lead, like really help you during an interview process. And then there's the whole of the sort of understanding the industry, the tech aspects, the trends, the sort of best practices and all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah. I
yeah,
think
that's
Radical Candour's a great shout to read, but yeah, it's all about, like, caring personally and challenging directly.
yeah,
People are complex, and it's about figuring out what personality type you are and they are, and figuring it out. But Pragmatic Programmer is a really good listen and read as well. If you prefer audiobook, it's the new version's actually it's got the authors and then there's a kind of moderator person in there as well. It's
oh,
quite
nice.
a good listen actually. And obviously they skip over the huge code blocks on the audiobook. But yeah, it is good because a lot of it's not language specific. It's just generally really good.
Yeah,
And I think I first read it like 20 years ago, and then the bits that I picked up on then are very different to the bits that I'm picking up on now.
yeah.
So it is, but yeah, it's all great stuff in there.
Yeah, and that's probably like quite timeless as well in terms of your approach to some of how you solve problems. There's some really good technical writers, like Martin Fowler is, like one of the best writers for a very long time in this space. Like, you'll never regret reading an article on Martin Fowler's blog, and seeing some of the stuff that he's doing as part of it's ThoughtWorks, isn't it? I think
Yeah,
Martin's.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, sort of like the father of DevOps sort of figure, isn't he? But yeah, and I really like a lot of articles by Joel Spolsky, although he has some strange technical decisions sometimes. But like the whole fix everything twice sort of ideas, and like there's a load of stuff in there around his time at Microsoft that I really like to sort of think about when I'm working on projects. But
Yeah,
yeah, obviously he's Fogbugs and then Trello, and then they sold Trello to Atlassian. They should have kept hold of it, to be honest. But
yeah.
that's random.
I think so we either need to get some new authors to start reading from, or we're showing our age here. I'm not sure sure which, but
Yeah, both
but
maybe.
but this is a good point there. Like, a lot of these things, it's important not to just jump on the latest hype and dig purely into the tech. I think it's good to look at some of these foundational principles, techniques, skills that you need to go into an interview. And I think it's always a good thing to find common ground with the interviewer as well. Understand, when you're having a conversation with someone, what piques their interest when you talk to them? Are they really interested in your communication skills more than the tech, or do they not care about that? They just want to get into the tech and see that tech skill. It's hard to know on a broad basis what they're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. I think if it's a tech role at a startup or a company in a specific industry, I think it's worth reading books in that sector as well. You'd be
Mm,
surprised how far ahead you can get by just reading 2 books, and it doesn't take that long, or listen to it in audiobook form, whatever, scribble a few notes. It might be that you'd have like one that's almost for dummies level and one that's like super techy, and
mm.
half of it might not make sense, but slowly it will start to unpick and you pick up on some of the terminology. And there's no easy way to do it other than just get stuck in, and you'll really impress in the interview if you know stuff that they know. Because once you start talking to them about stuff they know about, if they're not techie, they'll then be like, oh, they know about my world. And that builds that empathy, doesn't it? And they're like, right.
Yeah, so I think this is a really good point. So there's a really good approach where you can look at speakers from the same company that may have given conference talks or done podcasts or articles, and do your research and understand what they're talking about and what's relevant to them at the moment. A good example was I was chatting to someone who was interviewing at Monzo, and they'd seen Haldane and Giorgio's talk from All Day Hey from a couple of years ago,
Nice,
which
yeah.
was about like how they designed a more trusted payment flow when you were sending money to someone. And like even just watching that talk and understanding, okay, well, these are the problems that they're trying to solve internally, and this is how they approach those problems could really tell you a lot about what they're looking for in an interview.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, looking at everyone's talks is so good. Oh, slightly more boring, but download the latest financial report or statement or annual statement about that company as well, because often there'll be a sentence in there which just tells you exactly what they're looking for in that next financial year. And even employees don't do that. You'll brownie points. Yeah,
That's a
don't
really
give
good
all
point.
away.
It's interesting because it depends on what information you can gather, but you can also see like how much they're investing in things like R&D, and you know working on an R&D project may be quite different to working on uh, a really big like fintech system that might not might have a very different approach to how you work. And I think some of that will be quite telling about where they're investing their money, how they work internally, what's their culture like. I mean, I'm not saying you have to get the P&L for everything, every place that you're applying for, but it'd be interesting to look into that. I've never really considered the financial aspect. That's a really interesting angle.
Yeah, it gives you so much insight a lot of the time about the risks because they've got to outline them in there as well. Um,
So,
yeah.
so you asked me that question. So what's the question back to you then? Like, how would you start? Where would you start looking? What would be your approach?
I think it's ask people for recommendations. Like if you go out to events, I know that the event space hasn't quite come back to where it was, but like get yourself out there, go speak to people. Don't just message people on LinkedIn. Don't just cold apply for stuff. Get a bit of a network going and go. There's loads of free events on Eventbrite and Meetup, and you just got to get yourself out there talking to people, and then that's when you're going to spot the best opportunities because someone will go, "Oh, you do that. You should talk to this person," and that's what you want to get, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
You want to
yeah.
get someone else to vouch for you, almost, or that are already there, or know somebody that works there.
Yeah, I think that's where investing in your personal brand is super important. And I'm not saying you have to go above and beyond and have a big, like, nicely designed portfolio site with a logo and everything. It can be as simple as just like a little space on the internet for you to talk about who you are and what's interesting to you. And people associate that, especially when you used to meet people on like Twitter or whatever, and then you'd meet them in real life, you'd sort of know who that person was from their little corner of the internet. And I think that's still really important. Sophie Kunin did an amazing talk at this and FFConf a few years ago about how important it is to have that personal space that is yours and no one owns, and you can really show your identity.
Yeah, no, I think that's what this podcast is for us. It's just a way to get our thoughts and ideas out there. Yeah, almost solidifies what we're thinking at that time as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but yeah,
I'm
someone came
just
up to me at a trade show, the AI summit yesterday, and said, "I recognise you from YouTube. I think you'd only just put it on YouTube." So it's a bit freaky.
yeah. You just like, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry, you had to sit through. But no, I
Nice.
think that's been a really good chat. So yeah, thanks for talking to me about it.
Yeah. Cheers. All right. Chat soon. See you.